Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back. I just wanted to take a few minutes today and talk about the career of Cowboy Cerrone. And, we've been seeing he was obviously inducted into the Hall of Fame this past weekend at the UFC event, Sandhagen versus Chito Vera, right? He was inducted into the Hall of Fame there. And I think a little bit of debate around whether it's deserved or not. And I think I myself went back and forth, and there's kind of this thing where in the UFC, the standard to get in is different maybe than other sports, right? But then I thought about it and maybe, but also not really. I can't name, I should have done better research maybe, but I can't name specific examples for you off the top of my head. I'm sure a lot of you guys can or can come up with them, but there are a lot of athletes that have been, maybe Charles Barkley would be a good one. I think he's famous for never winning a ring, right? People who are obviously deserving of being in the Hall of Fame that don't necessarily have the championship accolades, right? But if you look at Donald Cowboy Cerrone's career and the things that he accomplished, aside from winning a title, I think his Hall of Fame bid is undeniable. Listen to this fucking shit. I'm reading this straight off Wikipedia. In the UFC, fight of the night 6 times versus Paul Kelly, Nate Diaz, Melvin Guillard, Alexander Hernandez, Ali Quinta, and Tony Ferguson. Knockout of the night 3 times against Charles Oliveira, Melvin Guillard, and Adriano Martins. Submission of the night twice against Dennis Seaver and Evan Dunham. Performance of the night 7 times against Edson Barboza, Jim Miller, Alex Oliveira, Patrick Cote, Rick Story, Mike Perry, and Alexander Hernandez. Think about the mix of names in that alone. Edson Barboza, Jim Miller, serious veterans of the sport, and then down on the other end, wiping out these up-and-coming guys like Perry and Hernandez. Moving on. Tied for second most wins in UFC history with 23. He's tied with Arlovsky. Tied for second most finishes in UFC history at 16. Tied with Jim Miller. Tied for most post-fight bonus awards in UFC history at 18. Tied with Charles Oliveira, who he beat earlier in his career. Third most bouts in UFC history with 38. Second most wins in UFC lightweight history with 17. Third most finishes in lightweight history with 10. And most knockdowns in UFC history with 20. All of the stuff on his resume makes him undeniable. And the thing is you definitely, again, the standard for UFC might be a little bit different because it does go through a period. And I think it kind of has gone through this period and we're teetering off to the end of it. But for the last 20, 30 years or so, a lot of guys have really been building that foundation. But I think that it's been built for a while now, and this new generation of fighters that we're seeing coming up, like the O'Malley's, the Jans, they're kind of going on top of the foundation that's already been built. I kind of think Conor McGregor, in all honesty, was the last layer of it in a weird way. Chael Sonnen laid it before him, and then Conor, and they set the precedents for how to make a lot of money and draw eyeballs to your fights and how to be a character, and then Colby stacked on top of that somewhere. And that's what I mean though. We're getting to the point where the foundation has been laid and a lot of big evolutions in the sport have already occurred. It's mainstream now. It's on ESPN. So there is this undeniable, kind of, I guess, I don't know how to explain it. There's this kind of it will loom over Cowboys induction just a little bit that you got in not based on your title wins and stuff, right? Not because you were ever the best fighter in the world necessarily, but because you put on a show. But if you look at the records and what he has, like I said, there are comparable people in other sports who have won, who've set plenty of records, done plenty of amazing things that make it into the Hall of Fame that maybe didn't win a title or maybe have very few titles, right? In team sports. So there is that similarity there. And I think that if you just based Cerrone's career based off what we just read, it's undeniable that he belongs in the Hall of Fame, man. And just the highlights that he has on his reel, especially the one over Rick Story, that picture-perfect combination, man. And like I said, he's fought everybody. Leon Edwards, Conor McGregor, Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson, Jim Miller. I mean, he fought through all of the people back in his era when he was really in his prime. And then beat up some of these new up-and-comers during this kind of new era, new breed of fighters. So he's seen it all. He's done it all. He was exciting every time. People cared about when he fought, and he fucking showed up to fight and backed it up. I don't think there's any doubt that this man belongs in the UFC. Like I said, the sad thing about Cerrone is that he was always so close, right? But he almost won the title in WEC, right? But he had 3 failed bids for it there. So he's never held the title in any organization, right? Obviously lost to Rafael dos Anjos in the UFC. But you can't forget what a bad motherfucker he was between, especially like that 3-year stretch that he had between the end of 2013 and the end of 2016. I'm just going to read through these names again. So he loses to Rafael dos Anjos, right? Pettis knocks him out with a body kick. He rebounds, beats KJ Noons, and then he loses to Rafael dos Anjos via unanimous decision. After that, on November 16th, 2013, he triangles Evan Dunham. He then goes on a fucking tear through the division, knocks out Adriano Martins, submits Edson Barboza, knocks out Jim Miller, beats Eddie Alvarez. Miles Jury comes in, he beats him. Benson Henderson, he avenges some of those losses that he took to him back in WEC, beats him, then knocks out John McDessie. I think he broke his fucking jaw in that fight. And then he loses to Rafael dos Anjos in the first round in a title fight in a rematch, right? So, man, it's like he was that close to getting the title. And obviously, you know, he had those issues where Pettis hit him to the body. He had some issues with his like his core, I think. And I think that kind of impacted him throughout his career too. But regardless, even after he lost to RDA guys, rebounds with the triangle over Oliveira, knocks out Patrick Cote, hits that fucking combination against Rick Story that's going to live in highlight reels for the rest of like all fucking time, and then knocks out Matt Brown before losing to Jorge. And that's where things start getting a little rocky, right? He loses some fights to like Darren Till, Lawler. I know I'm just reading through, but like it's crazy reading through all these names and just seeing all the fucking people that he's fought. I mean, if you were a big name in the UFC and you were floating between 155 and 170, if you were in one of those two divisions, there's a good chance, maybe even 145, there's a good chance that you ran into Cowboy Cerrone during your career. And like I said, he always brought the fight to you, and I think people really forget that tear that he went on for those 3 years where he was one of the baddest motherfuckers in the world without a doubt, you know? And one of those guys who just never got the title, but in my opinion, there's no doubt when you start reading through his accolades and how exciting he was to watch fight, man, I don't think there's any doubt he belongs in the fucking Hall of Fame. And you got to be careful because I think a lot of people he ended his career in the UFC on such a bad streak. Lost to Tony, Justin, Connor, Pettis, really lost to Nico Price, but that got overturned because Price tested positive for weed. Then lost to Morono and Jim Miller. A lot of those were finishes too. It's like 7 losses in a row, man. And I think a lot of people look at that and they're like, you can't do that though. You got to remember how bad Cowboy Cerrone was when he was streaking through everybody and setting all those records that you see on his fucking resume now. Remember who he was, and I think that there's no doubt. And remember what it was like to watch him fight and how excited you got to watch him fight. I don't think there's any doubt that motherfucker's a Hall of Famer. I do want to touch briefly on it because I think it's important to acknowledge stuff like this, right? That he has had a little bit of a controversial personal like some things come out against him that he might be a little bit biased towards like gay people or black people. You know, there were claims from Bobby Green that he was sexually harassing women and maybe some racial stuff getting thrown around. Same thing. Aljamain Sterling accused him of the same thing. He's used offensive slurs in the past, but it's like, I understand that you don't have to like him, and maybe you do have some sort of responsibility since you're in the spotlight and you are being interviewed by people. Your word does get out to the press. It reflects poorly on a violent sport. You know what I mean? When you're trying to make it, that can be bad for it. It's like it is a violent sport, and you don't want people talking like that and seeming uneducated, you know? I don't agree with a lot of the things that Cerrone said, but it's important to remember that this man was a mixed martial artist and a fighter and not a fucking political figure. You know, you don't have to like all the stuff that he said, but if you're just judging him purely on his accolades and what he accomplished in the UFC and what he did for mixed martial arts and the eyes that he brought to mixed martial arts and the performances that he put on for fans, all that. And he was also terrified every fight. He was like notorious for that. And I want to touch, oh my gosh, how could I forget about this? Not only, you remember him for all of his fucking knockouts and like the KO of Rick Story, like I said, but like, man, a lot of people forget how wicked his jiu-jitsu was. His jiu-jitsu was fucking nasty, man. He would triangle people, armbar people. I was in Denver when he armbarred Mike Perry. It was incredible, man. It was like, place erupted, went crazy. He was a legit, well-rounded mixed martial artist. And I think when you look at all of this, the more I talk about him, the more it's undeniable that the man belongs to be in the UFC Hall of Fame. So anyway, guys, just wanted to kind of give a shout out to him, just kind of talk about his career, talk about some of his accomplishments and the names that he's fought and why, in my opinion, this is a no fucking brainer. If you guys enjoyed, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, all that shit. Let me know if you think Cowboy was worthy of a Hall of Fame induction down in the comments, all that good shit. And yeah, thank you as always for tuning in. Bye-bye.